Do you know the story behind the constellation Orion's Belt? Well, if not, that's alright. We're going to learn about it today. Let's get right into it. So first of all, who was Orion? Orion was said to be a giant who was both famously skilled at hunting and also incredibly good looking. On top of these things, Orion also had some Jesus Christ-like abilities. He had the ability to walk on water. Now, Orion's birth story is conflicted as most Greek myths are. Some accounts of his birth state that he was the son of Poseidon and Euryale, the daughter of King Minos of Crete. Other stories state that Orion was born from three gods peeing into a piece of bull hide and then burying it underground, and then 9 months later, Orion popped out. The urine in this story would be providing the etymology for his name, Orion. Now, I for one prefer the first origin story, as the ability to walk on water kind of makes more sense if you're Poseidon's kid, and it would also lend itself to being a great huntsman, so it just adds to its lore more for me, although the second story is quite a bit funnier, so if you choose to believe the second story, I wouldn't blame you. In either event, Orion grew up, and eventually he became known for his good looks, his physical abilities in the hunt, and for being a giant. Orion was also well aware of society's perceptions of him, which led to him growing a massive ego. Due to his growing infamy, one Greek king, King Enopion of Chios, invited him to the island of Chios to live in his palace and to act as the island's huntsman. Orion, always welcoming a challenge, accepted the king's invitation. Orion moved to Chios, and after living on the island for a while, Orion ended up killing a lot of the creatures on the island. He also spent a lot of time in the palace, and he ended up falling in love with King Enopion's daughter, Merope. Orion attempted on many occasions while in the palace to woo Merope. He told her of all his victories and about how strong he was, and oh yeah, how his dad was Poseidon. However, Merope did not have the same infatuation for Orion as the general public did, and she resisted all of his advances. Orion, not used to being turned down, decided to take matters into his own hands, and on one fateful evening, he decided to get really drunk, and he forced himself on Merope. The next morning, when King Enopion learned what had happened, he was furious. In a rage, he stormed into Orion's room where he was still passed out from the night before, and had his guards hold down Orion while he himself poked out Orion's eyeballs, thus blinding him and making him useless as a huntsman. He then cast him out of his palace to wander the world blind, dumb, and kinda useless. And that's exactly what happened. Orion ended up wandering around the world aimlessly for a long time, until eventually he heard the sound of a blacksmith's hammer hitting an anvil. He followed the sound as it became louder and louder, until eventually Orion found himself at the foot of Mount Olympus, inside the forge of Hephaestus, the god of blacksmithing and of volcanoes. Orion begged his uncle Hephaestus to help him to get his eyesight back. Hephaestus, being kind of a gentler soul, decided that he would help, and lending him his assistant Kedalion, the god directed the giant to head east to the place of the rising sun, where he would find the god Helios. Only Helios, Hephaestus said, would have any possibility of giving him his eyesight back. And so, Orion traversed the land and the seas by foot with the help of Kedalion until he found Helios in his stables in the east. After begging Helios for his help, Helios led the sun into Orion's eyeballs, thus restoring his vision. And I personally don't know the man, but if I had to venture a guess, I'd bet that Andrew Huberman's favorite Greek titan is Helios. Upon having his vision restored, Orion somehow felt that he was the victim here, sought out King Enopion to exact his revenge, but the king somehow hid himself underground in a bronze chamber. Orion eventually gave up on his revenge against the king and retired to the island of Delos. He began hunting alongside Artemis, the goddess of the hunt. As time passed, Orion became more and more bold. Fancying himself a better huntsman than any human or god, Orion proudly boasted that he intended on hunting and killing every living creature on Earth. Now, upon saying this, Gaia, the primordial titaness who embodied the Earth, was obviously upset. This guy just said he was going to kill everything that she had worked so hard to make. And so, having enough of this particular giant, Gaia decided to put an end to him once and for all. And to do so, Gaia decided to send a scorpion after Orion, which slowly made its way to him until eventually the scorpion stung him and killed him. And that was the end of the world's greatest huntsman. Now, after Orion's death, Zeus decided to turn him into a constellation, perhaps at the request of Artemis to commemorate her old hunting companion. However, Zeus, having a bit of a sense of humor, decided to also make the scorpion that killed him a constellation as well, which became the zodiac sign Scorpio and the constellation Scorpius. And so the Scorpion and Orion were placed in opposite ends of the sky, so that when Scorpion rises on one side, Orion flees and sets below the horizon on the other. And even now, thousands of years later, we have Orion in the sky forever running away from the scorpion that killed him, while the creatures of Gaia continue to roam the earth below. This myth, like many Greek myths, serves as a warning about the dangers of becoming too proud of your own abilities. Be humble. You never know when someone's going to sick a scorpion on you. And that is the story of Orion. If you're interested in more Greek mythology, which explains why things are the way they are, subscribe to this channel for more lessons from the Greeks in the days and weeks ahead. Thank you for watching.